looks like we're ending Trump's first term where it began, with members of the resistance burrowed into government, leaking incomplete information with the worst possible spin on it, all done to ensnare the president in another major, costly investigation. In January 2017, it was Comey and the deep state. In September 2019, it's Nancy and Whistleblower-gate.
Today, I'm announcing the House of Representatives moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry. The president must be held accountable. No one is above the law.
Well, as of this hour, 0 Republicans, but at least 179 House Democrats are in favor of impeachment. And why? Because a phantom whistleblower reportedly claimed that the president used the threat of withdrawing aid to a foreign country, Ukraine, to pressure that country into investigating Joe Biden and his son. Now, the irony is that the case Trump wanted investigated involved Biden himself threatening to withhold a $1 billion aid package to Ukraine if a supposedly corrupt prosecutor wasn't fired. He actually bragged about it. Well, that prosecutor was investigating the company Burisma, on whose board of directors Hunter Biden sat, and also that paid him boatloads of cash. Oh, the fact conveniently glossed over by most media today? The whistleblower has no firsthand knowledge of the president's conversation. Oh, but none of that matters.
The actions taken to date by the president have seriously violated the Constitution.
I think what is going on is that the president has committed several impeachable offenses.
These horrible, obviously impeachable offenses.
Another impeachable offense. He is already, I believe, the most corrupt president in American history.
Now, ludicrous. Yet the Democrats, if nothing else, they know drama. Congressman John Lewis kicked off today's festivities, pouring on the emotion.
Today, I come with a heavy heart, deeply concerned about the future of our democracy. And I'm not alone.
This incendiary drumbeat all day long had this effect on the markets. The Dow plunged roughly 200 points before bottoming out around 1 o'clock. Well, it recovered after the White House said it would release an unredacted transcript of the call with the Ukrainian president. But it then sunk back by the end of the day when investors anticipated Pelosi's big impeachment announcement.
New calls for impeachment hitting Wall Street. Stocks slammed after Democratic Congressman John Lewis called to begin impeachment proceedings against the president. Right now, Nancy Pelosi is meeting behind closed doors with the House Democratic Caucus. The speaker will hold a news conference immediately following that meeting.
Now, the most sickening thing about the phase, and it's a phase that we're about to enter, is that House Democrats, they know impeachment, a whole inquiry is futile. The Senate Republican majority is not going to vote to convict the president, and the country overwhelmingly doesn't want impeachment. What I think most people do want is a continuation of what the president has already delivered America: peace and prosperity. The truth is, despite all the dire predictions of a looming Trump recession that started kind of at the end of last year, that now seems highly unlikely. So Democrats are in an unenviable position going into 2020. That's why they couldn't even mention the economy at all at the last debate. Instead, it was all, he's a racist, he's a white nationalist, xenophobe, and other personal attacks. Anything but a serious discussion about how they would outperform Trump's economy.
Look, it's just a continuation of the witch hunt. It's the worst witch hunt in political history. We have the strongest economy we've ever had. We have the best unemployment numbers we've ever had. African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, lowest in history. They're going to lose the election, and they figure this is a thing to do.
And why would the Democrats risk destroying the best economy in the world? Well, the president's right here. Why would they risk hurting millions of entrepreneurs and workers who've seen wage increases, or families who now have more money in their pockets? Well, it's not just the president who had a hint about that. Earlier today, Nancy Pelosi inadvertently revealed the reason.
What's more serious is that he can't win. That is very serious to our country.
Oh, yes, he can win, Nancy. And you and the overzealous radicals in your caucus could very well be helping him seal his second term. Beyond the grandstanding and all the fulminating today, the Democrats proved once again that they are incapable of putting the greater good of the country ahead of their own hatred of Trump and their thirst to regain power. Pushing the nuclear button of impeachment, it's an admission that they are not confident, not in their ideas or in their candidates. Can't beat them? Impeach him. Hey, why don't they put that on a bumper sticker? And that's The Angle.